Now, we had a sad call to the programme. We were bringing it to you from our West Waterford studios in Dungarvan yesterday. Around this time, I think, on the programme, from Joe. And Joe is a grandfather. And he was asking advice from you, our lovely listeners, on his situation. One of his children, adult children's marriage, broke up recently. And it's been 6 weeks now since he or his wife have been next or near the grandchildren. And they're a tad broken-hearted about it, needless to say. And he was wondering, is there any legal situation that might apply to grandparents which would ensure that they would be granted access to their grandchildren post the marriage breakup of adult children? On the line to me now is Josepha Madigan, a family law expert and solicitor based in Dublin. Good morning, Josepha, and thank you very much for taking the call.
Not at all, Billy.
Now, what is the context? Well, we know the context, but what is the legal situation here, if any?
Well, first of all, I feel for Joe. I think grandparents are often the unsung heroes in marital breakdown, indeed in any relationship breakdown. The law as it stands at present, grandparents are very much treated like any other person who's acting in a local parentis role. And I suppose the only light on the horizon is that there is now a new bill going through the Oireachtas entitled to the Rights of the Grandparents Bill 2013. But at the moment it's not yet enacted. And first off, to say to Joe and any other grandparent who wants to gain access to their grandchildren, and they have a huge role to play in that regard, is they can go in to the district court and apply for leave to apply. So there's a two-tiered approach, really. And what the court will take into account is the grandparent's connection with the child or children, first of all, and the risk of an application being granted, whether or not that would disrupt the child's life to the extent that the child would be harmed by it, and also the wishes of the parents and indeed the wishes of the children themselves. So I do think the judges tend to be quite fair towards grandparents because they understand that this is, all relationship breakdown affects not just the couple themselves, but the extended family. And the great thing about this bill is that it will provide for the very first time in Irish family law a definition of what a grandparent is. So that's quite exciting in that sense, and I think it's way overdue at this point in time.
Joe described the breakup, and I didn't tell us whether it was the daughter or a daughter or a son that was involved, but he described the marriage breakup as being very bitter. That obviously would add complications to the situation.
It does, of course, and obviously I would always say to grandparents that if there was any way of negotiating an agreement or, through mediation or indeed any third party before having to go into the district court, then we would, of course, recommend that. But at the same time, if it is so antagonistic between the son or the daughter and the non-custodial parent, if you like, is suffering and their extended family, then do go into court. That's what it's there for. And the grandparents have a huge role to play in the children's lives.
The sad thing is that the children could end up being used, and possibly are at the moment being used as ammunition in the conflict between the
Yes, that's
parties.
inevitable, and it can happen a lot of the time. But I mean, what the court will look at is what's in the best interests of the child, and particularly now with the children's referendum, all of those things, the voice of the child is going to be the most important factor, regardless of what either parent says. And one novel provision in this act, or this bill and this act when it comes through, is that grandparents will in fact be able to apply for custody of the grandchildren, which is very revolutionary, really. And the only way that will happen, though, is if both parents are unable or unwilling to care for the child. But it just means that rather than the children being taken into care, that the grandchildren themselves can step in that role. So it is going to be very important for grandparents. But I would urge all grandparents not to feel that just because the one parent, if their child was married to somebody or had a relation with somebody and that parent is stopping access or barring access, not to let them be afraid that they will have rights if they go into court and argue their case. They should be granted some access.
And that's under the existing legal situation?
That is, yeah, it's a two-tiered approach. So really, when the bill comes in, it'll just be one application. So it'll just make it simpler. But that doesn't mean to say that they can't get access now if the judge feels it's appropriate under the circumstances and, again, in the best interest of the child.
And Josepha, what kind of costs would be involved in this?
Well, I mean, the legal aid board is available for people who don't have the means to pay for assistance themselves. They should call into any legal aid centre and look for advice. And there's also FLAC, which is a free legal aid service. The district court fees are a lot lower than it would be in the circuit court or the high court, so it should be achievable. And I suppose you have to remember these are your grandchildren, and it might be worth fighting for that. At the end of the day. So really, it's up to each individual themselves, really.
Complex too, though, nevertheless, in terms of the emotional issues involved.
It is, and as you say, children can be used in pawns, but I think, people have to try and rise above that and realise that there are children here, and children are suffering, and they can have established wonderful relationships with their grandparents. And, grandparents across Ireland, particularly now in the recession, have been looking after the children on a day-to-day basis for working parents, and that needs to be recognised. And I believe that this bill will address that, and this act will address that when it comes in.
Okay, very much appreciate that, Josepha. Thank you very much for taking the call. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Well, that clarifies it, does it not, Joe? I hope you find that information useful. That was Josepha Madigan, family law expert and solicitor based in Dublin, on grandparents' rights. Now,